Hey everybody, Sluggernaut here. I'm just back with this same tech demo I've been messing with. And if you haven't seen it before, this is really all it does, is that I've set up ways to do these. I can set a mesh to, a dynamic mesh to any mesh that I want and do these cuts upon impact. Did a whole video on it. So anyway, moving forward, I just added some gas stuff underneath the hood so that I could make a network game. And that was really just, again, part of a personal demo that I never planned on showing off. But now we're kind of getting to like the gritty part where when I simulate some stuff, here, let's move the other character. We can see that very quickly, because of the hitching, right? This isn't lag. This isn't a network lag. I'm not doing any sort of lag simulation or packet loss settings or anything behind the scenes. This should be a perfectly fine simulation. But because I'm hitching so hard trying to render this stuff, because as you can see in the task manager, my VRAM is completely maxed out, basically. That my poor little computer here is just struggling to simulate properly. But now you can very also easily imagine two computers. One is very fast, one is kind of slow. They have bad ping between them. Maybe talking to a server in between instead of somebody just hosting. While if that were always the case, actually even still, you would have your local. You can see you would have your local simulation of the physics. Um, and they aren't going to line up with somebody else's simulation of those same physics and these same calls. So we've got a pretty big issue here, and I think I called it in my very first video when I talked about this being so physics heavy and so precision heavy that we would have this issue. Well, uh, here we are. So we were able to. I was able to prove myself right that I made something that wouldn't work in multiplayer. Look at how good I am. So what's the solution? We have this like hitching issue. We're also kind of gonna we'll probably end up trying to simulate some network traffic or something. Um, the answer, instead of trying to make sure that everybody simulates the physics in the exact same way, which is really just I think an exercise in frustration and probably an impossible task. You just need to understand. We need to understand what is the actual call that we need to simulate perfectly, and that's going to be this this hit right here. And as long as our incoming actor, if we say, do we own this actor? If yes, conduct the simulation as normal and replicate it to another player. And then if no, if we don't own this actor, do nothing. We should be receiving, a replicated event at some point that then does this exact same thing. So we'll probably end up with some connections that come up here, up to here, really the first instigator, but it's going to be coming from a completely different and replicated event. We'll see if I'm able to pull that off and do it exactly like that, and at least as much as possible prove that we have gotten past that bad replication, and that yeah, that bad replication of the outcome, not just network replication. Uh, yeah, so we'll see if I'm correct, and I'm not actually entirely sure. This is untested, so hopefully this video even comes out. I'll see you guys in a few. Hey, I just wanted to show off some, just cut in some Unreal Engine 5.4 functionality real quick that a lot of people don't know that I think is pretty high value. Look at this, you can move this splash screen in 5.4 and above. Woo! We made it. All right, everybody, we're back, and sort of as expected, making two different projectiles, kind of do roughly the same thing, but have two different behaviors. That is being client-side validated and server-side validated. Kind of adds its own weird technical issues, but the the main proof was sort of proven. It took me maybe 35 minutes knowing as little as I did about gas and replication, but just enough to get it up and running. where we let's just show it off. Um, what happens is you can see I have 3 players created here. You can see that we have the server 0 and then 2 clients. So the server is the first one I'm going to move around and have fire. Now if I left click, just as we saw before, we'll shoot a sphere. My computer cries its eyes out at doing the rendering of all 3 of these clients at once while trying to record the screen. But all 3 clients are now seeing and replicating the exact same information. So no matter where I shoot and hit, we shouldn't have any divergence in the cuts that we see on these dynamic meshes. So we'll see that I'll just pick up a gun as a client, I'll shoot. You could see, if you were watching carefully in this upper left-hand player, the ball was already bouncing back towards me, towards my camera, or towards my player, and then the cut happened. That's because the client told the server to create the object, and then the server controlled it. So the server saw the hit and then had to replicate that down to this client. No matter what the client is already doing and already seeing, the client isn't going to make any of these dynamic mesh cuts on its own. It's going to be created and validated by the server and sent back down. And let's just go back to our third client here and get ourselves a nice thing. Now, that's all sort of like normal and expected, and this is what we would do in most games, right? We would try to essentially have this server just tell everybody exactly what's happening for the most part, and at least at some point that has to happen. We'll kind of go over that in a minute. But what I wanted to do was also, when I right click, shoot a totally different type of projectile, so I can obviously see that they look different and behave different just in the first place, and do client-side validation. So when I jump and right-click, we see that I have a cut. I'm on the client. The server sees the exact same cut. The other client sees the exact same cut. Everything seems to be exactly the same. I did have some divergence a little earlier, which I don't understand how that's really possible. So we'll try some stuff. We'll just shoot and it'll hit. And I have noticed with the server, it looks like its very first shot shoots 2 projectiles, and then it sort of figures itself out after that. Not entirely sure what that is, and I'm kind of past the point of really getting into this anymore. This is just a fun and interesting little project for myself to sort of mess with and learn a bit more of replication and a bit more gas with. And yeah, actually, we can see with the server here, we did have a difference, and I don't know what causes that sometimes. So I'm still missing one little detail somewhere, and I'm not sure what. And again, this sort of demo is not something you should really do, right? No game should ever have a left click, right click, client side validation, server side validation, all come through a dynamic mesh and need this janky logic to determine, you know, did you own the projectile, and do you have authority or not? And if you don't have authority, tell the server so the server can, multicast everything. This is unnecessary to do all of this in one chunk. Now, yeah, what we should be doing is and we don't have a dedicated server. We have a client or a person, a character playing that is also the server. So we do have just some weird behavior that you wouldn't see in, let's call it, a real multiplayer game. So what happens here, we can kind of see how simple the logic is. This gameplay ability is replicated, and instance per actor. Nothing really special going on here except the replication of the gameplay ability itself. And then the projectile it fires, while it looks undefined here, it's just defined by the weapon itself on pickup. It has this projectile class that's set, and it's set in the blueprint. So we've changed the fire function here a little bit. So all the rest of this information that is empty, these 4 down here, can stay empty, because this is how the function looked originally this fire function had an empty signature, and we were able to just call fire. And that's it. Sorry. So now all I've done is set that projectile to replicate it as well. So it's a replicated actor. So upon creation, and we have has authority to check, by the way. So only the server calls this. So when a client activates the ability, because it's replicated, the server and client will get right here. The server will pass this has authority test, create the replicated actor, and then end the ability, and then that's it. And you'll notice, by the way, the client never ends the ability. And interestingly enough, the client does not have to end the ability. The server will now call this every time because it's replicated and make sure this runs, and that's it. The client never does any other logic. They receive the replicated actor, and we're done. And then when we get into the dynamic mesh hit, we come in, we make sure that that what is hitting us is a projectile. This is so other collisions don't affect anything. The owner, let's say, of the client shot, so the owner would not be the same as our local player controller. Because we're the server, we have a different player controller. So this will be false. We will check for has authority, which is true, and we will do a multicast hit, and that's it. That's all the information we really needed. If we were just doing server-side validation, we just replicate the really all we would have needed to do is replicate the impact point, because the projectile itself wouldn't matter. Would the projectile matter? The projectile ends up coming in here, which is, yes, a giant mess because of all of the different things we have to do based on whether or not we are client side or server side and what information we received. Because what happened here? Because we need to do all these extra things to be able to link up with this final logic that we always need to run. And I want to link up right here. Then we need to have already set the rotation and scale, and check our projectile type, because we set a projectile differently if we are a client. So all of this stuff needs to happen. If we are going to do these two different types of validation and have one function, the smarter thing to do, if I cared about actually making this a real game or anything like that, and for some reason want to do client side and server side validation for different types of shots, would be to have two different function calls between, and so if we were doing like the server side validation, we get down here to do server side only, have its own function that it calls, replicated, and then its own dynamic mesh cut, and then we would have, again, tell server to replicate, and then call a different multicast function, or event rather. It calls a different function that handles having all of this extra stuff. So anyway, it doesn't have to look this bad. So I think we covered the server-side validation call. It's nice and simple. We haven't changed a lot. One other thing we did, no, we didn't. We didn't even have to change the fire call or anything. So yeah, so we covered everything. It would be very simple. So highly recommend, if you're doing a game just for logic's sake, do server-side validation only. Now on client-side validation, what we do get out of client-side validation is that we don't have to replicate the entire actor, which is the projectile. We don't replicate this gameplay ability. We don't replicate anything until, so we make sure that we are being fired by a first-person character for whatever reason. And it's just a validation thing. And then, right, this was a nice printout to make sure I could see who was firing back when I was having issues figuring out what was going on. And then we check if we have authority, because if we are the server already, like the server slash player on that is acting as the server or host, all we have to do is call multicast, because we're already the server and we just multicast this this event. And if we are not the server, we need to tell the server, just like we did in the dynamic mesh that we kind of went over quickly. What we have to do is tell the server to run that event. And I just realized this doesn't then go to a multicast from here. That's probably why I saw some divergence in... No, it's still odd. Because even if a player didn't get this fire shot, so anyway, let's just follow it through. And then, by the way, so we tell the server to fire, and then we fire our own local copy, and then go from there. So this is telling the server, hey, fire this projectile from this character. Then we come into this event and we call fire, and then we get a little bit of information. What we want to know about the character's rotation and location. This ended up being a mistake because what I really wanted was the camera rotation from the player, which is how it's done in the code originally. We get the player's controller, and then from their controller, we get their rotation, which is really their camera rotation. Are they looking up and down, left or right? Rather than their actual facing normal or their character's normal, looking up and down doesn't change their forward trajectory or forward normal, right? So that's the mistake we kind of made down here, is that we just rotated the vector. This magic number vector is just this magic number that comes with this UTP weapon component. So back to it. We just rotate that vector with the player's rotation, which again was just their actor rotation, which is their just forward or normal vector. So anyway, there's a little bit of laziness there, and we didn't get it quite right. And that's because at this point right here, we don't have the player's player controller, another player's player controller or their camera. So what I need to do is have already sent in this rotation, and again, I'm just kind of done with it. So coming back to it, we didn't change much else in here. We added this function signature, or these variables to the signature rather, and then just added a slightly different type of fire where we actually set an owner. And then essentially, if we can't get this player's controller, which means it was somebody else and not us locally, that means somebody else owned it, so we want to set that owner to null. I believe that does happen. I'm now sort of hesitant. And then what should happen is when we get into the dynamic mesh, since the owner does not equal the controller, because the owner will be null if it was somebody else's, this is part of my issue, isn't it? We get into here and say, oh, well, are you the authority? So if a client fired, we're going to get in here, say, oh, that wasn't your projectile, but you do have authority, so replicate that impact point. Crap. I see. So, again, I'm really just kind of done. What should I do here to fix this if I were to going to continue working on this? How could I differentiate those two? I mean, at this point, I would just say, it would honestly be much better to just say, is the projectile the same as the, cast the owner? Oh. No, we can do is valid. Boolean? Is that what it is? I'd have sworn you could put in the, you know, sort of C++ style and, but I suppose not. So as long as the owner, God, this is such a nasty spaghetti mess. Oh, whoops. Wanted to do the owner is valid. Whew. Not the actor itself. Of course, the actor will be valid. So yeah, actually that might have fixed some of the things. So we'll do another quick check real fast. 'Cause I think that was actually causing some other issues now. I want to go and do one more thing. I didn't like this hack that I had to do earlier. So anyway, you can see what a pain this is, and nobody should ever do it like this. Yeah, so I would just refactor things and continue on. This would be a completely viable like game, even though it looks like it's chugging so hard. Are you serious? Why? I know why. We don't set an owner when we left click. It's kind of the whole point, is that we just create it and let it flow, let it fly, and let the server handle everything. Alright, so if we do it one more time. I thought there was a Boolean like not. Oh, there it is. And again, owner should always be valid. Sorry, should always be valid if it is a right click. It'll technically be valid. It just won't. But the player controller. Yeah, never mind. Sorry. Yeah, the owner is either valid or not. Anyway, my apologies. Got a little hung up there. So one more time. And if you made it to this point in the video, comment, because I don't believe anybody is going to. But I'm having a great time anyway. So now we left click, and it does its complete madness. And then nope. So still not the right answer. That's okay. So now that we've royally hosed that, so just back to has authority, and then so we're back where we started, with one other change that I am worried about. So this one was the weird one. We actually kept getting in here, and this class coming in here was null, which didn't make any sense because it should only get in here and get down to this point if it was a right click, and the class would have been sent in. So I didn't really understand exactly what was happening there, but it is still happening. So, is there anything else that I changed that I should mention? So, alright, and yeah, so this was actually a page specifically recommended to me by somebody I was interviewing with about multiplayer stuff. I was very honest about what I did and did not know about multiplayer replications and rule sets, and they turned me on to this particular it says it's blog posts, but it's just a nice compendium for multiplayer stuff in Unreal Engine, and being able to look at this and understand, okay, from the server, right, if they run a multicast, everybody sees it, but if you're a client and I want everybody to run I want run on all server and clients from a client, right? I want to communicate some data and have everybody understand something and see something. That doesn't happen. There is no runs on server and all clients in this table, so you have to, make a server call and then, make a server call and then the server does a net multicast. So that was pretty interesting. And so what you want to do, of course, is what we did, which is the dynamic mesh, I think, is the better example of that. When we get all the way up here, I'm sorry, if we don't have authority and we get all the way up here, we tell the server to replicate everything, and it does a multicast call. And you can see that there is no logic in between besides a print string. There's no logic in between, so we literally don't do anything ourselves as the client. We tell the server to tell everyone, which is right here, tell everyone to receive this hit information. And we need to do that in either way, whether we are the server or the client. So the client-side validation is kind of a little bit of a misnomer, but at the same time what we're saying is that the information is coming straight from the the information is coming, that is not what it looked like a second ago. The information is coming straight from the client, right down here, and then they are giving all of that information to the server, who hands it directly over to everybody, as opposed to this other version where everything is on the server, is the only way to ever get here, and they are the only ones who ever directly send all the information. It isn't a bunch of different clients sending the information to the server and then back to the other clients. So this has been the major difference between the two. If you didn't know what server and client side validation were. And I think that's it. I've rambled on quite enough, and I am quite done.